Hello and welcome to another edition of Meet the Manager from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. In this series we meet a fantasy Premier League manager with an excellent track record. We'll find out how they've achieved a high number of top finishes as well as gather their tips for success. Today I'm joined by Mark. Mark, welcome. How are you?
Hello, Joe. Happy New Year to you. Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. You joined me at a good time, I guess, and I'm very much looking forward to the games coming up and the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, we've timed it well, but I say that you've been doing well pretty much most of the season, really. Definitely since game week 13, where you've been in and around the top 10,000. But we'll come to that a little bit later. But first of all, we got up on your screen your season history. And so it's important that people see that why you're here, and they can see those figures there. So there's 8 top 5k finishes. I think I've calculated that right. 4 in the top 500 and 1 in the top 50 in 2014-15. You're on course, hopefully, for at least your 9th top 5k finish, even higher perhaps, with a current rank inside the top 3k. So first of all, the key question I want to ask is something you kind of inspired me by in something that you said on a recent Fantasy Premier League show. People were asking their advice over the Christmas period and just in general. And you said, stick to the plan. Whatever your plan is, if your plan's working, stick to it. Don't go off that. So what is your plan and how has it changed over the years?
Yeah, I think that I think we know when you played the game for a few seasons that you go into any season with a plan, and it can quickly change. I think what is the deciding factor often is value players. I think in previous seasons I've always had like a strategy I've decided, and then 2 or 3 obvious value players emerge, and then it all goes out the window. We've seen it a few times. Once I suffered from it. I didn't react quick enough. The other time I did and did okay out of it. Obviously, I'm talking Vardy and Kane and Mahrez we've had in recent seasons. Which, as soon as they crop up, you've just got to go with it, and then you're reverting to plan B, C, or D. You just can't legislate for that pre-season. Until things get running, then you realise that these guys, you've got to have them in, and then your whole team is shaped around the value that they provide. I think this season it's been far more predictable, and I think that the plan that I had at the start of the season I've been able to execute and keep with. So it's quite a rarity that I think. Normally we have to kind of adapt our plans to what happens, but this season I think largely I've been able to keep faith with my plan to go cheap up top and invest in midfield. And at the moment, obviously, it's worked for me. It could all change, as I've said many times. So I think over Christmas, the video you're talking about, I'm talking about the Christmas period. I think it's very easy because the games are so, the game weeks roll in one into the other. I think it's very easy to react. And I'm seeing a lot of people who perhaps don't have the 5 slots in midfield who are going, right, I need to sell Sterling to get Hazard. Right, I need to get Salah in, so I need to sell Anderson. I need to get Pogba in, so I need to sell another midfielder. And so there's this conveyor belt of heavy-hitting midfielders, which are the latest essential, if you like. And I think what my strategy has allowed me to do is go distance myself from that and go, well, I've got those players, and at the moment, none of the strikers are really making themselves that same status. We're not seeing Kane and Aubameyang get into Hazard, Salah, and Pogba status in terms of that clamour to get them. I must get them. That fear of missing out. I don't have that for Kane and Aubameyang. So I've been fortunate in that my strategy has kind of allowed me to get through the Christmas period without having to change my plan at all. But all around me, I see people, scrapping their midfielders for one heavy hitter to another, and I think that's easy to do, and I can totally understand it. But I think my strategy into Christmas was always like, well, I think I'm going to be tested. I think Kane is going to deliver. I think Aubameyang's going to deliver, but I want to stick to my plan of keeping heavy in midfield and give people like Sterling a bit of time, because you're talking about a player like Sterling who's playing for Man City, who are the best attacking team in the league. Liverpool arguably are now on a par, if not above them, perhaps temporarily. I still think City will come good. So I think it's nice to have a plan. It's nice to be able to stick to it, but often we know that conditions can change that, variables come in. And I just think over Christmas it's a very testing period, and it's very easy to just have a knee-jerk reaction to the latest player who peaks and then scrap everything to get him in. And I've been lucky in that I haven't had to kind of do that. But I think season to season, we all know that it's nice to go into a plan, but you have to evolve that plan based on, in particular, as I say, the value players that crop up. But this season, I think, has been pretty predictable, I think, in terms of value.
Yeah, I mean, I think in previous seasons we've seen Kane, for example, last season. Kane was exactly the kind of player that people got out at this time last year when he was, and he got back-to-back hat-tricks, and it was those that kept hold of him. I think you were one of those, kept hold of him or got him in for those. So, you did well there. And we're seeing it's exactly the same thing has happened this season with Salah. People got rid of Salah. He got 21 points against Bournemouth. People thought, okay, fair enough. And then, over the next 2 or 3 game weeks, another 2 12-point hauls follow. So exactly the same thing's happening again. And people chop and change as well. I think the interesting thing about your strategy this year, and we'll talk a bit more in detail about this season, but I think you can move. Say, for example, Kane keeps getting hat-tricks every week, and you're just there going, right, abandon plan, I have to get Kane in. You can do it because you've got so many premium midfielders. You can just turn them into a cheap one. So do you have that plan B at the back of your mind all the time?
Maybe. I think that the blend, there's a blend going on season between the midfield and the attack, I think. And that's what, looking at before I started the season, I actually think, we're going to see hat-tricks from Salah and we're going to see hat-tricks from Hazard, and we have, and Sterling as well. I would say is, if you look at the leading goal scorers, and there's not a massive gap between Kane, Aubameyang and the midfielders. In fact, Salah, Hazard, Sterling, and even players like Anderson and I think Pogba will start getting up there as well, Martial. I think there's not a massive gap at the moment. I'd expect the top strikers to be 5-6 goals ahead of the midfielders, and it's not there. No. So I think we've seen that season upon season. Midfielders starting to keep pace almost with most strikers, and Kane and Aubameyang, I thought they would be further ahead, but they're not. And so I think that's worked out well for me. So I've just had this general awareness of the positions. You look at defenders as well, wing backs we've seen over the last 2 or 3 seasons become almost wingers, haven't we? Alonso, and we're seeing it with Doherty this season. So I think FBL managers have had to kind of look at the positions differently and go, well, actually, if I've got Doherty on my team, he's a right winger, and Alonso, not so much this season, and previously has been a winger. And I'm looking at midfielders in the same way. Salah's a striker; he's going to be a forward next year, I imagine. Hazard, he's playing the false 9 at times, but everything goes through him. You're looking at these players and going, they're not really traditional midfielders. So I think we have to kind of break down the classifications a bit and just go, well, what are the players that are scoring the points? What are the players that are scoring the goals? And look at the positions they're playing, use the eye test to look at that, and forget how they're classified and just judge their positions based on what you see and perhaps the data as well.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed you've been doing a lot this year is take a lot of early transfers, and I guess over the seasons you've done this occasionally. What are the pros and cons of doing that, of making those early moves? And have you indeed taken more this year? And do you think that is because the nature of the game has changed when it comes to pricing? As in, the price rise sites are getting more and more accurate, more people know about them. So when you start seeing them in the blue or the red, whether they're going to go up or down a price, you know that they will the next day, and if you have to make the move. So what's your rationale around these early transfers?
Yeah, I really hate missing out on a player by 0-1. I just can't stand it, and I set out every season to try and minimise those occasions, and that means that I have to squeeze as much value out of my team as possible to make sure that doesn't happen. I think if I miss out on a player because I've made the wrong decision, then fine, I'll take it. That's my mistake. If I miss out on a player because I'm 0-1 short, because 4 weeks ago I didn't make that transfer early, I really hate it. Because it's you've made the right call. You're going, that's the player I want, and then you go to get him, and you go, if only I'd have sold Mitrovic earlier, I could have got him. He's the player I want. I'm now going to make do. Now, some managers, yourself, Vila Ronca in particular, are much more patient, and they don't care about that, and they always find solutions. I think that, perhaps they're better at it than me in terms of, well, I can't get the player I want, but actually for the money I've got, I can get this player, or this strategy works just as well. I'm not like that. I kind of set my heart on players. Like already I'm looking ahead and going, right, this player is a player I want in 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm making sure I do everything in the mean leading up to that to make sure I'm in a position to get that player. And that involves making transfers at times to ensure I've got the budget to get that player. So, when I make an early transfer, it's not just for that week, it's looking ahead. It's going, I'm going to need that. If I don't protect that 0-1, I'm in danger of not being able to get that player in 3 or 4 game weeks. And that's just the way I play. I care about team value. The other thing why team value I think is important is because with the free hit and with the second wild card, that selling value is directly converted into the opportunities you get. I'll have a big free hit budget because I've monitored team value as I go, whereas managers who perhaps only got like a team, a lower team value, have less choice when it comes to the free hit. So I think there's that as well. But I just hate missing out on a player I want by 0-1, and it happens to me every season. I mean, it will happen. I can't think of one yet, but it will happen to me eventually. And when I miss a price, like this week, I was looking at selling Patricio soon. He's gone down to 4.5. He was at 4.6, so I've lost 0-1 there. That frustrates me a bit. I wanted to get, because Patricio could be a player I sell in a couple of weeks, and that is like I'm thinking, I could have done with making that move earlier. And I don't beat myself up about it, but I do think that's an opportunity missed. So, yeah, it matters to me, that part of the game, because I think that it gives me some advantage if I do it well. It doesn't always come off. Of course, the risk is you make an early transfer and you get an injury. But what I will say in this situation is I am very careful in that I look at my first sub and think, okay, if worst comes to worst and I have made a mistake here, do I have a sub that can come in that I'm happy with? And this season, we've got Jimenez, Wan-Bissaka, Danny Ings. We've got players like that who you think, well, if they come in, if I have to play them as into my 11, it's not the end of the world because they're actually pretty good players. So, that's a factor. If I look at my first sub and think, well, I want to play him, then I can make an early transfer. Because if I get one injury, I've got someone to come in. Okay, I could get 2, but if you're getting 2 injuries, then other people are going to be suffering from that as well. So I don't do it willy-nilly. I do look at my first sub and think, right, is this a game week where I can risk an early transfer? Then I'll make it. Also, if I've got 2 transfers, I often use one early because I think if you've got 2 transfers, that gives you that advantage and you should use it. You should make an early transfer with one.
You make a good point about this season lending itself to early transfers, and you mentioned those players there. I can't remember a season like this where we've had so many good quality budget players that play. I mean, Wan-Bissaka is, for those of us, most people got him in when he was 4 million. And, he's a season keeper, really. There's no reason to get rid of him. He's going to play. He plays week in, week out. Previous seasons, we've maybe had, say, Nicky Shorey at Reading for a 6-week spell. And that's about it, really. But this season, we've also got Bennett at Wolves as well. We've also got Doherty, for many people, was a 4.4, 4.5 defender. And you mentioned Jimenez and Ings as well. I've never known anything like it, really, but it does lend itself to early transfers, as you said, because the benches are good. Previous seasons, though, your early transfers probably might have come unstuck if there was an injury. Would that be an example of that you've adapted your plan to the way the season's panned out?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been unlucky a couple of times, but nothing. I don't have any real horror stories. I mean, the whole Morata Firmino thing was just a bad decision. I don't think that was bad luck. Just awful decision making. So I don't think, I don't look back on that and think, oh, that's a lesson there. I must never do early transfers again. And the thing is with early transfers, I think the success stories, you can't pinpoint them because they come later in the year. Later in the year, when you can buy a player and you're right on budget, well, that is actually a success of an early transfer you perhaps made 10 weeks ago. You don't know. You're not going to log it. You're not going to go, oh, yeah, that's because I made an early transfer in game week 4. But it all adds up. I mean, so it's when you miss a player by 0-1, that's when you go, I wonder if I could have got that 0-1 earlier in the season from making a transfer just a day earlier. And yes, you probably could. So that's the scenario I try and avoid. And I don't log the success and failure of this, but it's just anecdotal, really. But it makes me feel like I'm doing everything I can to optimize my team and run it efficiently if I keep an eye on value. And that's just the way I manage the team.
Of course, value is just one reason behind your transfers as well. But what are the other main influences of your transfer and captaincy decisions as well? So for some people, they really like the eye test. I know I spoke to FPL General on a previous one of these videos. Very keen on the eye test. Some people go for underlying stats. I know Adam Hopcroft we had on. He looks in great detail about performances against top teams, home and away, last six, and all these types of things as well. And ownership as well. Some managers pay attention to it. They see it as a game. You're playing against 5 million other people, and they all move in different ways, and it's kind of second guessing how they're going to move. And some people mention FPL General again. They don't even look at ownership. Just doesn't appeal to him, and value doesn't appeal to him either as well. So what about you? What are your main influences? What's the kind of thought process? And feel free to give an example or two.
I think first of all I would say is that I think I'm more influenced by the previous season than a lot of managers. I think this season in particular has been heavily influenced by how I suffered last year with Kane and Salah. I owned Kane and Salah for a lot of the time. I owned Salah all the season and Kane most of it. And I often went with Harry Kane as my captain because I was wedded to him, and I don't know whether, although I had great faith in Salah as an FPL asset, I wanted him from the start and I had him all season. I just felt that he can't keep this up. He can't possibly keep this up. Kane is the more explosive, and I just clung to that all the way through. So I think this season, the biggest influence on my captain decision is what I suffered last time out. And I'm seeing it already. We saw it even this week. Kane got 5 points. Salah outscored him again. I saw that week in, week out, captaining Kane. I'm not saying it's going to continue, but that's definitely been a big factor for me. So this season, my strategy was I'm not even going to get Kane and give myself the option. I'm just going to have Salah in there and some other big midfielders, and I'm going to go with them. I think I interviewed Yusuf, who won FBL, and he said that his season turned when he started captaining midfielders. And I took that on board as well. And I think that's a wise thing. I think even more this season, you've got midfielders who are able to get, when their ceiling is just higher for me at the moment. It might change, but it is. So that for me decided my overall strategy this season was I was going to go mainly with midfielders. In terms of when I make my selection, obviously this season I'm looking at mainly Salah, Hazard or Sterling for captaincy, and I'm kind of alternating between the three. It is hard to ignore Salah because of his consistency. He's hit that groove now, so it's going to be difficult. But then, I'm going with Hazard this week, for example. So what factors do I use? Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the fixture comes into it first and foremost. I think I look at the opposing defence and the opportunities that they're likely to give up the player. Another thing we've learned actually is sometimes a home fixture isn't always the best thing. Sometimes the space that you get away from home for someone like Hazard or Salah can open up points. We've seen it as well. Sterling as well has been doing okay away from home. But, a home fixture against a defence that's going to give and surrender opportunities is obviously the first thing I look for. And I'll look at data. I'm a stats man. I mean, I obviously bought stats to Fantasy Football Scout from Opta, so I'm very much, like to back up my decisions with data. Obviously, there is the eye test as well, but, I don't need to watch hundreds of matches to know that Salah, Hazard and Sterling are playing well and, they're the key players. I don't need to do that.
I'm just going to ask you about the eye test as well, because it's something that struck me, because a lot of managers we have on here look at the eye test, and all I could think of was examples with me where it went wrong. And there was a particular example when you did the same. It was the same. What transpired to be a mistake that I made and you made. It was a game where Hazard was playing Everton 2 or 3 seasons ago. He was incredible, and I think both of us got Hazard in as soon as the final whistle went. I
sold Sanchez, I think.
Yeah, and I did a similar move as well, and because he was so good, and the eye test completely blinded me. What I didn't do was look in detail at the fixtures he had coming up over the next 4, and looking at how few chances the teams he was playing had conceded, and the general makeup of Chelsea, and perhaps that may have, and he did pretty much nothing for about a month. It's not so much that it was an early transfer, but it was more the eye test that got me there. Are there any examples that you've got where the eye test has really worked out for you, or the eye test has just really let you down?
Yeah, I think you've got to have these things on a list of priority. So for me, as I say, fixture and then probably stats come next in terms of the captaincy selection. And the eye test does come into it, but it's probably third or fourth. It's probably like, I'll probably just look at footage to see that the player is on. I mean, Hazard is an anomaly. I think he can look brilliant and still get a run of 2 points for 3 or 4 games. We've seen it this season. So I think Hazard is a player you've got to show patience with. Again, my strategy has helped me do that this season. So I think that it's difficult because he's the kind of player who looks brilliant in games, but there's still blank. Yeah. It just doesn't work out for him. So I don't think you can rely on the eye test all the time. But equally, there are players like Kane, for example, is a player where the eye test does work. I think you can look at Kane over a match and you can see pretty quickly whether he's on it or not. Yes, he can pull a 25-yarder out of nowhere, as he did the other day. But I just think that you can see if he's got that extra yard of pace. Is he wanting the ball? Is he coming deep? If he's coming deep to set up play, there's something wrong, because we saw it last season when he got the injury, when he got the ankle injury. That's what he's tended to do. He tended to not make runs beyond the defence, not even sit on the shoulder, but come and try and get the ball deep and influence things like that, because he felt he didn't want that contact with defenders. He didn't want those sprints because he wasn't able to do it. He wasn't able to show up. And I think with Kane, you can watch him, and if you see him do these kind of things, you think, he's not on it. There are players where definitely the eye test works, and you can make a decision based on what you're seeing. But other players like Hazard, Hazard does have poor games, but in every game I see Chelsea, you just think, well, Hazard could have got, he made 3 or 4 passes to players who had chances, who had they scored, he would have got 2 or 3 assists. So that happens in a poor game for Hazard. So he's very difficult. But there are some players where you can look at, like Salah. A lot of people looked at Salah early since he's not on it, and I concede. I think that was the case, but he still had enough, I think, to keep ticking over for me. And I always felt that when he does hit it, he's going to explode points, which has happened recently. So, I think the eye test is valid depending on the player you've got. You're putting under the microscope, if you like.
I guess another example would be Pogba. You and I got him in at the same time, probably for similar reasons. It was after that Cardiff game. He just looked on it, and he looked central to everything. But it wasn't just that, the eye test. The eye test was part of it, but I would imagine you look at the fixtures as well, and you look at the comments as well. So Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was saying about him as well. So is it also important to monitor things like that, essentially kind of news, and look at those kind of manager quotes?
Yeah, I do. I think with Pogba, it was 100% the eye test. And you take some credit for this as well, because I was talking to you about Martial and Pogba, and I was completely 50-50. And then you obviously spoke about the long term. He's definitely more assured of his start. And then I was kind of working my way down the list of the factors that I use, and talking to you as another, talking to other managers. Of course, we all do that, don't we? Get opinion on Twitter, we get opinion on Fantasy Football Scout. So that is a variable that I use as well. As I worked my way down the list, I got to the eye test, and what I wanted to do, I looked at the Cardiff game, and I wanted to see not what Pogba did on the ball, but what he did off the ball, because I wanted to see him getting beyond, getting furthest forward. And when people like Young and Lindelof got the ball back, was he making runs? Because Lindelof and Young are players who can pass the ball. So was he aware of that and bombing forward? Yes, he was. I saw it clearly. And then, so the minute I saw that, it was the eye test that convinced me. I was like, yeah, that's it. I'm getting him, because you can clearly see that although he obviously came out of that game with assists, but what the overriding factor for me was he was on his bike. Every time there was a chance, he was on his bike and getting forward. And lo and behold, it's transpired.
It was other players passing to him as well, and that's what I noticed. They all just wanted him to do something.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you've got, was he 6'4"? And if you've got a player like that bombing forward, you're going to look for him, aren't you? Because it's like having a mobile Duncan Ferguson to go for. It's ridiculous.
Obviously, you mentioned stats as well. I mean, being a stats man, to put it mildly, you kind of got Opta into Fantasy Football Scout, integrated there, and it's kind of kick-started really a big trend of people looking at that. And now when you look over social media and Fantasy Football Scouts forum as well, everyone's debating stats, and people have got their favourites, and I look at this, I look at that, and now we've got XG as well, expected goals, expected assists, and people are actually having arguments about these stats as well. It's quite something really, quite big heated debates about them. For you, what general advice would you give in analysing statistics, and what for you are the kind of key ones that you really look at? Yeah,
I think all of these things, whether it be like algorithms like Rate My Team, whether it be the eye test, whether it be other people's opinion, you've got to merge all these factors, these variables together. and you've got to use them all to come to your decision. I don't base any decisions purely on one or the other. I don't look at Opta stats and go, that's it, I'm not even going to bother watching that player in action or talk to anybody about this, or or look at the fixtures. I'm just going to get him on this data alone. No, it's not the case. What I do though is I use the data to back up a decision. So, I made some transfers overnight, and so what I did, I looked at the players in question, and I looked at, okay, are they posing? I got a certain defender in, which we'll come to in a minute. Are they posing a goal threat? They're a cheap defender, so I'm not going to rely on them for clean sheets. But do they have a goal threat? So if I have to play them, do they give me a chance of points from set pieces? Yes, they do. Right, okay. So I looked at penalty box touches for that player recently. I looked at goal attempts in the box recently, and that told me that yes, they do have a goal threat. Fine, thanks very much. That's what the data gave me. It's a factor that was at play in my decision making. It wasn't the overall be all and end all. So there's no silver bullet here. There's nothing out there that is the one definitive thing you use and then that's what you use. And if you do it, you're going to do really well. No, what you've got to do is take everything you've got, every bit of information, every weapon, every tool, everything you've got, combine it, and then you've got to come up with your own weighting system, your own set of priorities for where you put, what stock you put in each one. So do you go on Twitter and get someone's opinion? And if you do, how much weight do you give that? Do you go on the comments and get opinion? How much weight do you give that? Do you analyse XG? How much weight do you give that? Do you look at the fixtures coming up the next 3 or 4 rounds? How much? You've got to decide that yourself. And I think that's what a lot of the good FPL managers do, and the best ones have systems that work. Everyone's got their own weighting, I expect, to these factors, but I don't. For myself, I don't prioritise one over the other. I always check the stats though. I never make a transfer and not check stats. I mean, I just think that why would you not do that? I've got Arnautovic back in, right? So I want to see that Arnautovic before his injury was doing enough to justify that, just so I'm going straight back to him. It's things like that I think if you've got that available to you, why wouldn't you use it? I just think that people who go, oh, stats, it's boring and the stats guys are just killing the game, whatever. It's not that. It's not, it's just another thing to use. And if it's available to you, why wouldn't you use it? Because it does help. There is no doubt it does help. It can hinder too. Sometimes, stats suggest something, it's bad data in terms of, well, okay, he's having 10 shots, but they're not quality shots. But then XG comes along and helps with that. So I think we're seeing football statistics evolve as we go, and as they do, they're becoming more and more effective as one tool to use to help fantasy managers.
Just turning to hits as well, I've noticed you've taken 9 hits this season already. That seems a lot for a lot of the managers I speak to on this series here. Usually they take about 9 a season, but you've already taken 9. Is 9 a lot for you? And what advice would you give around hits? And one thing, a supplementary question to that, is something I know you do, is mini wildcards, is when you save transfers but also then use hits afterwards. So so explain a bit about your kind of hit philosophy.
Yeah, I'm a believer in, I like playing the wildcard early because that opens up hits as an option for me. I think when I've got the wildcard late going into, I mean, I know some people played their wildcard only recently, and I think when you keep your first wildcard, you start worrying that, I don't want to take a 4-point hit. Certainly don't want to take an 8-point hit. I've still got my wild card. Why would I do that? So in a way, I find it liberating to get the wild card out of the way, fix my team early on, and then it gives me the freedom to go, well, I'll take a 4-point hit, and actually I might now and again take an 8-point if it's right. What guides me with that? I think there's a couple of things. If I look at players that I want in, and there's potential that in 2 or 3 weeks they're all going to increase in price, and at the same time the players that I would get rid of will all decrease in price, and I think the swing is like 0.3, 0.4. For me, that warrants considering a 4 and maybe even an 8-point hit, because I just think that if you've set your heart on a couple of players in the game weeks to come, and that when you get to that point, you're not, if you leave it a week or 2, you're not going to be able to get 1 or even 2 of those 3 players. That is a big factor for me. And I think that, I look at immediate, do they give me an immediate boost? But more significantly, do they give me a boost over 3 or 4 game weeks? I think this season what I've done quite well is I've taken bad game weeks on the chin in order to have good ones. It's happened to me just now, and it's happened to me previously early in the season where I've come like 5 million in the world or even lower, one week, and then the next 2 weeks I've just had stellar game weeks. And I think with hits, that's part of that. You go, well, I'm going to take an 8-point hit, and I'll struggle this week. Yeah, fine. But I think those players I'm getting in will actually turn into profit over 2, 3, 4 game weeks time. Now, you've got to use the factors I talked about. You've got to use stats and fixtures and opinion and stuff like that. You've got to weigh all that up and come to that decision. And then you've got to have the balls to do it. And I think this season I've been able to do it because I've not been in the spotlight as much. I haven't had to go on Facebook Live on Monday morning and go, yeah, I took an 8-point hit. I look an idiot. I came 5 million in the world. I haven't got to explain myself. So that's good. And it's allowed me that more freedom to do that. I think that is my natural game. I think, Vida Ronka, that mythical FPL manager who, is lauded as the best FPL player, and quite rightly, he doesn't play like that. No. I do play like that, and I think it's good that we've got managers who play in different ways. And I like taking a risk. I like taking a gamble, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. And so I just think it's a strategy I like to keep up.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point that you make there, because a couple of times this season you've taken a couple of hits and use that kind of just put those kind of that mini wild card in place. And I remember one particular eyebrow raising, I will say, but hasn't done. It's done you quite well, really. Was when in game week 12 you got Fabianski, Balbuena, and Murphy in, and people going, "What? You've taken like a double hit here. What's going on? These are 3 kind of okay-ish players." But I could see what you were doing. You were planning ahead, and you were getting some value. These were all value players, and it freed up money to go elsewhere. And you just took that. And you're into the top 3,000 now. So, yeah, I can see that's a good...
Yeah, I mean, that one didn't work out necessarily. I was hoping that West Ham would keep a clean sheet at Huddersfield, and there was a short-term gain, and then West Ham had good fixtures, and then Balbuena got an injury. And that's it's an example of how it can not work
yeah,
out.
But it was finding value. And ultimately, Fabianski has then gone on to get you those points as well. And the money that it's freed up there has got other things. Also, you were not moving. So for some people, say around game week 16, people were moving Salah out for, I don't know, another premium midfielder. But you're just juggling around these. It doesn't, to be honest, whether you've got Bennett or Balbuena, it doesn't really matter. These are just going to be players on your bench, really. So it's making those kind of hit risks on players that it doesn't really
matter. I think I've been, again, my strategy this season going big in midfielders enabled me to have 5 strong midfielders, and therefore I'm not taking hits of players that are going to really hurt me. I'm not, I think when you take a 4-point or even an 8-point and you're taking out players like, I mean, I took Philippe Anderson out recently, not for a hit, but I took him out and got Pogba in, and that hurt me, and that almost did. I mean, it's, Pogba delivered as well, but players like Anderson, players like Richarlison, certainly obviously Salah, Hazard, Sterling, Pogba, these are players that if you take them out for a hit, there's every chance they're going to hurt you. So when I have been taking hits, I've been doing it with players that I felt I've had a very, very tough fixture to come or didn't have the capacity to explode points. And I think that really does help your decision making when you're taking hits for players who are kind of mid-price or even budget players.
Before we move on to the current season in a bit more detail, just got a couple more questions overall. Now, I noticed the kind of stain on your track record there is this 2013-14 season where you got 192,000. But this is why it's interesting. The next season you're in the top 50. So arguably, if you're in the top 50, a few decisions here or there, that's almost winning it, basically. So what went wrong that season? And you mentioned earlier that you're influenced by the previous season and you learned from it, really. So what happened there? Because that's an enormous turnaround.
I think that's a season that we both remember fondly for different reasons. Yeah. I think it's ironic. I had a wild card early, and I had Ramsey in my team, and then I took him out last minute before committing to the wild card, and that really, really stung me. And then what happened then was I was like, well, because I had Ramsey and I got rid of him, and I regretted that decision. You then go, well, I'm not going to get him back. I'm gonna be stubborn and stick by that decision. And Ramsey, he just can't keep this up, because if you remember, he was a midfielder raiding the box and finishing with aplomb with regular. I think he got like 12 goals, 8 assists, something like that. And he was I think it was like 5 million, wasn't he? Or 5.5. He was really cheap. And I missed it. I got it and then let it go again. And then it was like, what? I didn't really want to admit that mistake. And it just went on and on and on. And then the other player was Torre, who you had all season. It was just ridiculous. He got 20 goals that season. I
Yeah,
look back at it.
20 shots, 20 goals. That was it.
He had a conversion rate of 31%, which, to put that into perspective, if you look at this season, Martial's got 42, but the next best amongst players who've got plenty of goals is Sterling on 25%. And Toure had a 31% conversion rate over the season. I think he got some penalties. He started taking free kicks out of nowhere. He started becoming, a free kick expert and started banging them in as well. And I was just watching going, well, he can't keep this up. And every week I was saying he can't keep this up, and he did. And those two players destroyed me, really. And I think it was my inability to admit a mistake there. And that's what I learned out of that season, was like, as soon as you think you've made a mistake, own up and react and fix it. Don't sit there and go, no, I'm right. I'm definitely right, because basically then you're going to get punished. And I think that was a big turning point for me in FBL, because I think that it has got harder. I think as the seasons go, recent 5-6 years, the tools, the information, the data available, Fantasy Football Scout have played a part in that. I've played a part in that with the Premier League and so on. It has become harder to compete because there's so many other managers with the same amount of information and put in as much work as you. So you have to raise your game, and you have to analyse the way you play the game and find the things that you do badly. And back in 2013, the thing that I did badly was admit my mistakes. I was too slow to react, and I was just a stubborn idiot. And I learned from that, and obviously I've been doing that. Yeah, absolutely.
The second question overall really is, obviously you've been in the kind of public glare really. Every move you make, you've been doing this obviously with running Fantasy Football Scout. You've had the Scoutcast as well, the FPL show over the years. But this season you've taken a bit of a back seat from those kind of more frontline roles. So obviously you're appearing here now, and you do make appearances, but it's not every week. So to what extent has being that kind of very public FPL expert affected the way that you manage your team? And this season, have you found it quite liberating not to be in the public glare every week?
Yeah, I mean, that's first and foremost. Let's say I was in a privileged position. I mean, I'm not moaning about being in the public eye talking about FBL or having FBL as my job, because I'm incredibly lucky to ever have that chance, that opportunity. So that's the first thing to say. But of course, with it comes a certain amount of pressure. I didn't really realise. I mean, I was very lucky in that I had an outstanding season in that first year. And I think, with Fantasy Football Scout up to that point, I was able to come in and out of the limelight as I saw fit. I committed to doing the Scoutcast every week, and that was okay, because it started off as just me and Granville in a mini league thing, and then it obviously became bigger. But that was okay. But then when I started getting involved with the Premier League, it changed the game completely, because then every Monday morning I was there in front of Facebook Live, talking about the game week just gone by, with my good or bad game week behind me, and I was on the TV show as well. And I think the pressure of that did tell on my health, and also on the fact that it started to affect my decision making, I think, to some extent. I definitely feel this season I've been able to take a few risks and play a more natural game than I have been the last couple of seasons. Obviously the first season working with the FBL show and so on, I had a brilliant one, and it worked out. Last season it was more difficult, but I think, as I said previously, I think I'm always affected by the season before. So if I have a good season, I perhaps I always have a mediocre one or an average one, perhaps the season after. So there seems to be a pattern with my seasons. Outstanding, okay. It seems to be a pattern I have. So I just needed, I think, to break out of the pressure I was under, to kind of relax a bit more this season in order to have a better one. I think that inevitably, when you're having to explain every single decision on camera, and stand by everything you do with your team, and you get questioned about it, you get called out on social media. We know what it's like, and I think I did a fairly decent job ignoring most of that, but you are aware of it, and so I think I've enjoyed this season more than any I can remember, I think, because I've been able to play like I used to play, which is just for the fun of it, if you like, and concentrate on my team for my sake and not for anybody else's. I'm not giving advice to the world anymore necessarily. I'm not on there, on social media talking about who to captain and so on. I'm making decisions for me and me alone. And if I make mistakes, it's me who suffers, not anybody else. So it's nice to have that freedom to do that, because the way it used to be. And that's what got me into the game in the first place.
Because it is a game. and it is meant to be fun.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's move on to the current season. So I put up your team from the most recent game week. You had a great game week. Pogba there, still plugging away, and your commitment to captaining Salah there. I was having a look on the FPL Statistico tool, putting your team through that. And what you said about your plan is to focus more on the midfielders. And Salah, well, that's clearly worked out. You've captained Salah 12 times. That's the most. He's averaging 18.5 points. That's pretty good. I imagine that's probably the average recently is much higher than his previous earlier in the season. Sterling 4 times. He's averaging 19 points. Hazard 2 times, averaging 35 points. So Hazard's your golden boy there. Kane, Aguero, just 1 time each. You haven't owned them much. Kane averaged 2 points. That was the Cardiff game. And Aguero 16 points. So you had a plan and you've enacted it. Now, if those stats had been the other way round, and Kane and Aguero, you captained them once or twice and they were getting you 30 points each time, you'd probably have a completely different team now as well. But what do you think over the season really have been 1 or 2 kind of key successes so far in terms of particular transfer, particular strategy?
Yeah, I think that I've just been fortunate that players like Jimenez and has come along and given me the budget striker options. And Arnautovic I always thought was good value for his price. I looked at Zaha initially as well. I thought he was good value for 7 million. So when I looked at the price list, I thought there's some good forwards there below the big hitters that I can look at, and then that will enable me to sink money into midfield. And obviously Salah was a target from the off. Hazard as a player, I always enjoy owning. He hurts me, but I like watching games of owning Hazard because he always seems to be threatening points. Every time he's on the ball, which is quite a lot. Sterling, I always thought once he got settled would be a factor, and I'm standing by him. Richarlison always. So there was a whole cast of midfielders. I mean, you look at it. I haven't got Anderson, I haven't got Sane, Martial. There's Pereira. There's midfielders that could come here and do a good job in my midfield that I would definitely consider. And I'd probably consider all of those before I even start looking at Kane and Aubameyang. I obviously know that those 2 strikers can hurt me. And because of that, I stand to have game weeks like I had a couple of weeks ago where I came almost 6 million in the world. Ridiculously bad game week. But when I have those game weeks, it kind of reassures me in a way. I go, well, okay, that tells me that my team isn't as template as people say it is, because if it was template, I wouldn't be coming 6 million in the world. I'd be coming 200,000 or 2 million or 1 million. I'd be in the middle. I would be just simmering. So I'm either having dreadful game weeks or I'm coming 200,000 in the world and I'm going up the ranks. So although it looks template, it actually isn't, because I'm having quite a roller coaster time with it. But I'm having more good game weeks than bad. So I think it's working really well, and I think I'm fortunate at the moment that Kane and Aubameyang haven't quite hit that kind of sustained form. For me, they need to explode a big score and then get more double figure scores, and at that point then I might have to reassess, but that hasn't happened yet. No. So right now with Salah, Hazard, Pogba, and I think Sterling and Sane will come again. I think that I'm very happy with the strategy I've got. And the defence picks itself often. Liverpool defence, I want to stand by Alonso. Doherty, surely you have to play him because he gets points against anybody, and then you get a couple of budgets. I think in goal, Fabianski looks outstanding value still. You rotate him with somebody. So I think the rest of the team is kind of settled. It's just how you treat the big hitters up front and midfield. That's the key to this. And I'm settled on my plan, and it's working at the moment. Okay.
On a recent Breakfast Club you appeared on, we spoke about world chess champion Magnus Carlsen, who's doing ever so well. I think he's just on the edge of the top 100 at the moment. And you joke that he's always thinking 8 moves ahead. But I think that's how you play. I think you're always looking 8 moves ahead, because you're getting players in, you're looking at, say, a fixture swing in January, and you're starting to plan ahead already from that. Is that a fair assessment?
I'm not that far ahead. I think I've 2 or 3 game weeks. And what I do, I use Rate My Team. I don't want to plug the tools too much, but I think Rate My Team is very valuable, not as a short-term plan tool, as a long-term planning tool. So I look at what the predicted points are for my team 5 or 6 weeks ahead, and then I look for a sweet spot of about 60 points. If it's predicting 60 points, there's not a lot wrong. And then I look how Rate My Team works out my bench, and I try and, if there's a game week there where I'm getting 50, 52, 55, I think, well, that's a weak spot. So I've got to think about that game week, how do I fix my team ready for that game week? Because Rate My Team thinks I'm not going to do particularly well in that game week. So I've got a clear weakness here. What do I do now to plan to make sure I plug that hole? So the transfer I made last night was to plug a hole for game week 22, for example. And my defence, I'm going to need my defence, probably going to need to put 4 out maybe. So I needed to get a better defender in to fill in a gap I had in game week 22. So this is how I use Rate My Team to kind of spot game weeks to come where my current squad doesn't cut the mustard. And then what I do is I try and use transfers leading up to that to fix that problem.
So it's looking ahead to the hang on a sec, wait a sec. Just wait for my dog to stop barking. And I'll just write that down. Could you move your head a bit further into the middle of the screen?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a bit better. Because you're moving one way and gradually moving off. Just wait for them to shut up. How's that? I might go. Oh, no. Hang on.
Mine have been good.
Someone dare to try and park their car nearby. Right. Okay. 46. Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about. Yeah. I was just about to ask you. So I was about to ask you a second question. So I mean, looking ahead, who will be the types of players you'll be looking to get in a few weeks' time? So you're looking ahead to January into February. Who's going to make up the possible template of the future?
To be honest, I'm not looking to make that many changes. I'm kind of hoping that my future transfer strategy is going to be juggling my cheap defenders and my goalkeeper, my second goalkeeper, to give me a good option in goal. I think that my 5-man midfield should hold unless Sterling continues on the slide. I don't think he will. I don't see me having to change that midfield. I don't think there's going to be rotation amongst that 5-man midfield. Richarlison's got a good fixture, so he should justify it. I've just got Arnautovic up front for Mitrovic, which I let Mitrovic go with heavy heart. I really like him, but I just think Arnautovic is a special player, and it will take a couple of weeks to get going. But I think that he's the talisman for West Ham, and I think we'll see a shift of points from Anderson back to him again. So I've got Arnautovic, Jimenez and Ings. Ings might go. I mean, if Solanke goes on loan, then that's going to be an obvious value option for a third striker that will free up some cash. But I'm hoping that my transfer policy for future weeks is going to be just shuffling my 4th and 5th defenders to fixture. And even my second goalkeeper to give me a better option than Fabianski some weeks where I need it. So if that's the case, if that goes to plan, I'm doing really well. But that's banking on not getting an injury or suspension, which perhaps is wishful thinking, but we'll see.
So you mentioned you've got Arnautovic in currently for Mitrovic. And that's an example of looking ahead. You're looking ahead at that type of player. He's anticipated to be a player that people will get. And you've already got rid of Anderson. So if people get Arnautovic, they'll probably move Anderson on as well. But you've made a second transfer as well. What's your other move and what's the rationale?
Yeah, that's more interesting. I've got rid of Luke Shaw because I looked at it and thought I wanted to get Luke Shaw to give me the chance to go 4 at the back over Christmas, but we're coming out of that period now. And I looked at it and thought I'm not going to play Shaw at Newcastle. I'm probably going to play Schindler at home to Burnley, which I think, Burnley won last night, but I think Huddersfield-Burnley's got 0-0 written all over it. I think Burnley will go there and think, well, if we get a draw, we're okay. And Huddersfield will have a different prospect at home. I don't see many goals in that. So I thought, well, I'm going to play Schindler over Shaw because Shaw could even get rested. Newcastle, that will be low scoring as well. But I could see Newcastle causing them problems with Phil Jones playing. I think Rondon, if he starts, will cause them problems. So I think United will concede. And let's face it, they've kept 2 clean sheets all season. So banking on United clean sheets has not really worked. So I've sold Luke Shaw and I got Bamber in because I just think that Cardiff, I'm talking about game week 22. They're at home to Huddersfield. So that is a good fixture. And I needed a defender because Shaw is going to be at Spurs. So I wasn't going to play Luke Shaw there. So I looked at Luke Shaw and thought, I'm not playing him at Newcastle. I'm not playing him at Spurs. So that's 2 game weeks. I'm not playing him. And long term, I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Alonso and Doherty, who are going to be my 3-man defence. So my 4th defender doesn't need to be 4.9. Why am I putting 4.9 into a player that I'm benching for the next 2 weeks and I probably don't need long term? So I've gone to Bamber because he's got me the fixture game week 22 and his goal threat's good. And the thing is, a player like Bamber, even if you have to wheel him out, even worst case scenario that I have to field him against Spurs, well, he could get me something at a set piece, and that's what Bamber gets you. He's a big lump who is a factor on set plays, and the way Cardiff use him on corners is Morrison's the first man, he's the target for the flick on, so he's getting all the touches in the box, but he's not always the one on the end of it. Often or not, that's Bamber. If you look at goal attempts, Bamber and Morrison are very equal. If you look at touches, Morrison's got far more touches, but because Morrison's going near post and getting often a lot of the flicks, or Gunnarsson's long throw, Morrison's a target, Bamber's behind him, working off the knockdown. So I think Bamber's all right, and I think he's going to be good value for me when I need him.
Yeah, I think, it reminds me, I had a Bolly from Wolves for part of the season, and it was a similar rationale. It was partly the eye test there, and you could see he's massive. He just leapt the highest, and they seemed to be aiming for him. And yes, you're right, they are doing that with Bamber as well. Bamber actually was mentioned on a Scoutcast some months ago, actually, for his headed goal attempt threat, and we were saying that he would be quite good, paired up against certain teams that concede a lot of those.
And he's a CBI monster as well. So if Cardiff do keep the clean sheet against Huddersfield, and they've kept 5 this season, which is mid-table, it's pretty good, then I think Bamber will get me some bonus. So I think he's a good option to downgrade. I mean, that downgrade from Shaw to Bamber meant that I could get an Arnautovic in straight away. And that was important to me, because I think one thing we haven't touched on, I think what has changed in recent years is this awareness of other managers, the top 10K, the top million, other top managers. We mentioned Villaronca, but players like Jay and Num, who season after season are right up there. I mean, so I have become more aware of these managers and what they do. Maybe I'm alone in this, but I like to look at what they're up to, what they're doing with their transfers, what decisions they're making, what decisions they're likely to make as well. I kind of judge my season on how I'm doing next to these guys, because they're top managers, and if I'm doing well against them, I'm doing well, basically. And so one of the reasons I've gotten the Arnautovic in is I looked at it and thought, well, a lot of the managers around me didn't get rid of Anderson, and I did. Maybe that's a mistake. So a lot of managers have still got Anderson, and I think, yes, they may be selling Anderson for Pogba, but they may not. They may have other ways of getting, or they may be wanting to keep Anderson. But what that does tell me is if they've got Anderson, they're less likely to get an Arnautovic in quickly. So because I haven't got Anderson, the plan was always get rid of Anderson and then quickly get an Arnautovic, because that will cover West Ham. And I just think Arnautovic is a special player. He was the one player last season who gave me a good memory. He got me those points. I think it was a home game. I got him in. I think I captained him and he did brilliantly. And so I've got a fond regard for Arnautovic. So he's come straight back in for me. And I think what's important for me is I know that not a lot of managers around me will go straight to him, I don't think. I think they'll have other things to do, and they'll also, perhaps wisely, give him a bit of time to get up to speed. I've gambled and gone straight in and hope that he returns against Brighton, because if he does, then there's 10 days to the next deadline. His price will go up, and then the other managers will start thinking, well, I've got to go now because he's going up in value, and they'll be under more pressure. And I think there's a good chance he will get something against Brighton, and then there's a good chance that he will start going up in value. So I want to get on early, take that pressure off, and get me a little bit of a differential.
Well, Mark, thanks so much for joining me. I think we've raised some good points there about kind of learning from mistakes, and also looking at value and the importance of value. And obviously been playing it for 12 or so years, so that especially with the chips, that's an important thing as well. But before we go, I mean, do you usually do a New Year's message on site on the article? But do you want to kind of deliver that?
Normally I'll write that out on the site, but I mean, David will be doing that, or Neil today. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to say Happy New Year to everyone and thank everyone for the support, the wonderful support they've given me and the site over the years. And thanks for still coming to the website and standing by me. I know I've backed off somewhat this season. I've tried to spend a bit more time with my family, and I've had some health things going on, but everything's turned around for me now. I'm enjoying playing FPL again. I'm loving dipping in and doing this kind of thing with you, Joe, and doing the Scoutcast every now and then. And hopefully you guys will stick by us, and Fantasy Football Scout will keep growing into an even better place to be as an FPL manager.
Well, thanks for that. And Mark, have a happy new year yourself. And
Happy New Year to you as well,
have a
Andrew.
great game week and rest of the season.
Cheers.